Welcome everyone to this session about embedded analytics with Tableau. This is the second session that we're running this week. On Tuesday, we had a session in which we talked about the reasons why you would want to embed a Tableau dashboard and why you'd want to adopt embedded analytics. And today we're going to take a look at the actual technical aspect of embedding Tableau. My name is Andre and I'm a solutions engineer from the Information Lab. I'm here also with my colleague, Robin. Robin is monitoring the chat. If you have any questions today, please put them in the chat. It will be a lot more hands-on than Tuesday. If there's anyone in the on the call that hasn't seen the session from Tuesday, my colleague Sophie has uploaded the recording to YouTube this morning. So if you want, you can take a look at that one after this session. Now, what I wanted to do today is, as I said, a bit more of a workshop style. So it will be hands-on, and we'll be actually writing some code today. I know Tableau is a no-code solution, but we're going to implement a no-code solution into some code, into a web page. Now, what I have done is I've created a public page which everyone can access. And we basically have that as a reference guide for today. So I'm just going to put the link to that in the chat. So it is till.bi/embed workshop. And this is a public link. It's I'm using a tool called Notion, which is great for annotating and creating notes and sharing content like this. This is, of course, free for you to access, you don't have permissions to change anything. I have permissions to change. But what we're going to do today is we're going to do a little bit of a workshop. So we have about an hour until 11, and we're going to focus on a few things. So I'm going to show you again what embedded analytics is for those that are new. I'm going to do it really quickly, talk about why embedded analytics. Then we're going to take a look at how to actually technically implement embedded analytics. What I've done in this Notion page, hopefully if you scroll through it, is that I've put lots of links and extra resources here. I also included code snippets of the things that we're going to do, and also some links to the Tableau dashboards that we're going to use. Okay? If anything after today you want to ask me, you can contact me by email, or if you click on one of our names here, it will link to our Twitter pages. So you can also message me on Twitter. So yeah, first of all, embedded analytics, what is it? Well, you're going to add with embedded analytics the interactive visualization capability of Tableau into web pages, into external facing applications. Now, what that will be is often you see that in the form of a portal or embedded in CRM systems like Salesforce. Other examples that we've seen of embedded analytics is putting dashboards in mobile applications. And the main reason why you should adopt embedded analytics is if you want to give external people, like for example your customers, access to your data, your insights, and then your dashboards. Often what we see with customers that adopt embedded analytics is that they want to monetize the insights that they're doing. Often this is for market research companies that, for example, want to quickly give access to the data that they have to their customers. For that, what I have built in the last few weeks, and I've also showed this on the webinar on Tuesday, is a web page called embedding.theinformationlab.co.uk. And this is basically a website that shows some of the capabilities of embedded analytics. Now, I've already mentioned this on the call as well, is that there are mainly three reasons why you should adopt Tableau when you do embedded analytics. Because if you're familiar with Tableau, you know that it's a self-service analytics tool, which is a no-code approach to data viz. Can I include the link? Yes, of course I can include the link. Let me put the link in the chat. There we go. And we have that it's easily customizable, but also Tableau is very secure. So Tableau, when you do embedded analytics, it inherits the permissions that you set up on the Tableau server. It's also very fast to deploy, because we all know as Tableau users that it's very easy to publish something to Tableau server. If you need to make a change because you need to fix a bug, for example, we all know how quickly it is to kind of redeploy that. Now, a good page on this, or sub-page in this website, is the examples. And this is kind of a collection of public-facing examples of embedded analytics that we collated at the Information Lab. Now, a really good example of what is really possible with this is, for example, this example from a company which we've been working with for a while, the European Investment Fund, and they have a Tableau map embedded in a web page. This basically allows people to access this page and then start interacting with this visualization. Now, this is one approach to it. Some of my colleagues have really been involved with putting Tableau dashboards and combining those with Mapbox. So one of my colleagues, Soha, she built this really cool website that's mainly using Mapbox, and Mapbox is a provider of interactive maps. And this is using a technique which is called scrollytelling. So on this web page, the moment I start scrolling, you can see that it animates the website. So you can see it zooms in. Now this is using Mapbox. However, if I scroll back up, you saw that there is a little chart here. And this chart here is Tableau. So Tableau embedded on a web page combined with Mapbox. So there's lots of things possible when you adopt embedded analytics. So that's what we're going to focus on today. We're going to learn how to actually embed something in a web page. So I'm just going to hop into the Notion page, and what we're going to learn today. So first of all, we're going to take a look at how do I embed Tableau. So there are two ways of embedding Tableau. One is using the embed code, the embed little snippet, or it's using the JavaScript API. Now, we've already took a look at some examples, so I can take that one as completed. We're going to take a look at what are the things that I need to learn, because you're all here at this webinar, and we're not assuming any knowledge of how to create a web page or have any background in web development. Also to mention that both Robin and I, we don't have a background in web development. We just have a very huge interest in learning how this all works. Now, what we're also going to do is how to work with the Tableau JavaScript API. The Tableau JavaScript API allows us to interact between the dashboard and the website. So we're going to make it interactive. We're going to give the user the option to export their dashboard to a PDF. And we're also going to apply some buttons to filter between the web page and a visualization. After that, we're going to take a look at the authentication. We're not going to implement authentication. That is a separate piece. If you're interested in that, we can talk about that offline. But we'll talk about the high-level approach to that. Depending on the time, we're going to look at how to design a dashboard for embedding, because you have various approaches to designing dashboards for embedded analytics. You can either build a whole big dashboard which will be loaded, or little individual components which will pop up on a website. So we're actually going to learn and write some code today. Okay? Hopefully this doesn't scare you. In the beginning, it did scare me a little bit, but I really enjoy it. And for that, what we're going to do is we are going to create our own web page. It's going to be a very basic web page, but the concept of embedding Tableau, it doesn't matter if you have a very complex web page or it's a simple one. And for that, what we're going to use is this link. We're going to use Code Sandbox. So if everyone clicks on this link for Code Sandbox, I'm just going to click on it. There we go. Let me actually open this in a different browser tab. There we go. And it allows me to sign in. I don't want to sign in. There we go. I am using like incognito mode because you don't need an account to use Code Sandbox. And how you typically build websites is that you have various files, like an HTML file, a JavaScript file, and a CSS file. And those are rendered in the browser, and that makes up a website. Now, what you often need to do is you need to install a text editor, you need to install a web server, you need to do all kinds of things up front. Now, because we only have an hour today, what I wanted to do is get up and running really quickly. And Code Sandbox allows us to do that. So when we're in Code Sandbox, what we're going to do is we're going to click on Create a Sandbox. And the moment we do that, within web development, there are lots of approaches to building websites. But the one that we are going to choose is the static one. And please follow along. However, I will, we can share the code, but also the code is already in the Notion page. So you have already all the content that we're going to do today if you have opened the Notion page. And here we have a link to static. So I'm going to click on static. You need to sign in to create more than 3 sandboxes. Okay, let me sign in then. Let me, rather than doing that, let's go here. Let me do static. There we go. What you'll see is my my layout here. It looks a little bit different than yours, but it doesn't matter. The functionality is exactly the same. And this is basically how a web page is built up, because Code Sandbox already gives us this HTML file. In this HTML file, what we can see is that the doc type is HTML. We have a head section and we have a body section. Now, if we go into the Notion page, if we think about HTML, now HTML is the actual structure of a website. It creates the building blocks. Okay? At the Information Lab, we also work a lot with a tool called Ultrix, and within Ultrix we do a lot of web scraping. And whenever I teach web scraping, I mainly teach about how websites, how HTML pages are constructed. Because by understanding how a web page works, you know how to scrape and get data from it. We also have several videos on our YouTube page if you want to learn more about web scraping. But what we have with an HTML page is, here, if I go back to this one, in the head section, this is where we see all of the kind of the metadata about the page. Everything in the body section, that is where the content that is actually being displayed on the page. So what we're going to build is a simple web page. So let's actually remove this H1, which stands for header, and we're going to create a new H1. So just going to say H1, and in here we're going to do embedded analytics with the Information Lab. There we go. Now, what is really good about Code Sandbox, if I now hit save by doing Control S, or I can go File, Save, it does hot reloading. So it reloads the page here on the right-hand side. So you can see all of the changes that you're making immediately in the page. Now, if you want to see your web page, but not in this Code Sandbox environment, Code Sandbox has this little icon where it says Open in New Window. And what that will do, if I click on it, you will see that it opens in a new browser tab, and it kind of already creates that web server and everything for you. So that's pretty cool. So now we got a header with embedded analytics with the Information Lab. And how HTML works is that you have different elements in a page. For example, a header, you can have a button, you can have a paragraph. So let's actually create a button. So if we go underneath this and we type in button, what we need to do is we need to now, in this section that we have here, say click me, for example. We need to then close that off. So how HTML works is opening tags and closing tags, and what you put in the middle will be rendered on the page. The moment I save this, what we'll see is that we get the default browser button here on which we can click. How this would work with embedded analytics with Tableau is that you could, for example, click on the button, then it automatically, for example, shows a new visualization or exports your report to PDF. Now, that is a little bit of an introduction to HTML. What I've done in the Notion page is I've given you a link to the Mozilla developer resource, which is a great, can't see where you're hitting save. Please highlight. Yes, very good point, Tim. So if I go back to the website, I'm going to File and then hit Save. Or I'm going to click on my keyboard, Control S. That will also save it. Yes, cool. So what we're going to do is let's actually go back to the main page and let's see how we can embed a Tableau dashboard. So we're going to step number 3. We'll get back to the CSS in a bit. But step 3 is embedding with the embed snippet. And what we see in here is a kind of a huge block of text. Now you're probably wondering, where am I getting this from? Now, what we'll do is I'm going to use a Tableau public dashboard. So if I scroll a little bit further, there's these links section. Just going to click on it and let me also put it in the chat in case anyone wants it there. This is a dashboard from my own personal Tableau public. Of course, you can use any Tableau public viz that you want to embed. You can also use Tableau Online or Tableau Server. I want to highlight that with the last two, Online and Server, of course, that's the authentication step if you want to authenticate or if you want to display the dashboard. But for this session, let's use this dashboard because this dashboard I'm going to use to also interact with as well. So if we use this dashboard, now I mentioned there are two ways to embed Tableau dashboards. One is the embed code and the other is the JavaScript API. Now the quickest way is to use the embed snippet. And we can find the snippet by going to the bottom right of the page. And we have a share button there. Let me increase the size of the page so you can probably see it a little bit better. And we have the embed code here. Okay. Now, this is embed code. This is the link. We'll get back to the link in a bit. But for the embed code, what we want to do is just click on it and put it on your clipboard by right-clicking and say copy. If I then hop into the code sandbox again, we need to put that embed code somewhere in the body of our web page. So I'm going underneath my button and I'm just going to do paste. So that's Control V or Command V if you're on a Mac. And what you'll see is that quite a lot of stuff is being pasted here. It's one big block. But if we save this, file, save, Code Sandbox will automatically format it. And what else it did for us, is it automatically displayed the Tableau dashboard in the page itself. So I think that's pretty cool. With just copying, pasting that snippet, you didn't have to write any code. You can already embed the Tableau dashboard. Now, I mentioned there are two approaches because you can also use a JavaScript API to do that, and we'll go into that now. But a few things to mention here is that what this will do is it will embed the web page itself, and it gives you full capability of the same thing as what you could do here in Tableau Public. So if I go here, I can still use all of my filters. I can, for example, change this, and we'll see that it filters the dashboard. So this is a great thing to give to your customers, because they can still leverage Tableau. And now what I've done, for example, is I've embedded this in a web page. But ideally, what I want to do is make it look a little bit nicer, right? At the moment, I haven't styled anything. I haven't made it look like the dashboard itself. So what I often do is I use a tool which is called Skeleton CSS, which automatically gives you some nice styles. So I'm going back to Notion, and underneath the link, so we had a link to my dashboard. Here we have a link to Skeleton. I'll put it in the chat as well. But if I click on that one, what it will do, it goes to what they call a CDN, which stands for Content Distribution Network, which is a way to share files over the internet as well. Does the dashboard have to be saved in Tableau Public or any dashboard you create in-house? No, you can embed also Tableau Server or Tableau Online in a web page. That's possible as well. I'm using Tableau Public because it's free and everyone can access it. So when we have this link here to the CDN, what we want to do is we want to grab this kind of element here, this URL. And what we're going to do is, if you hover over this, it gives me this option to copy something. So if I'm going to use a drop down, I'm just going to copy what they call the link tag. What that will do is I can just copy paste that link into a head section of the website, and then it will load this file. And what this file is a CSS file, and CSS style stands for Cascading Style Sheets. And with CSS, you can style a website. So every website on the web, of a lot of websites on the web, have their own unique look and feel. And that is being achieved by writing CSS. Now, again, because we only have an hour, I don't want to write up the full CSS. So what I'm going to do is just copy the link tag. If I go back into Code Sandbox, in order to load this, we need to put it in the head section of the page. So I'm just going underneath the title. We can of course change the title, but it doesn't really matter. And then if we put paste it there, so just Control or Command V, we are loading this CSS file from this particular location. So if we then hit save, we can see that now immediately the title changes. We have a different font, it increased in size, but also the button itself here changed into like a nicer looking button.
We have one question, Andre.
Yes.
That came up. Graham is asking, his browser didn't load the Tableau public JavaScript library in the Code Sandbox.
Okay. Let me see. What browser are you using, Graham? Because sometimes I've seen some browsers blocking Tableau public from showing up. He's using Firefox. Yeah. Maybe could you try Chrome, because that's the one that I'm using. It might be that I've seen some issues with Firefox in the past. Now, I don't know if these are issues or if this is something that Tableau needs to fix. But yeah, that's that one. Tim asks for tips for good resources for learning CSS at the end would be handy. Yes, that's a good point. CSS is actually fairly difficult, I think, to learn. That's why I'm just copy pasting this link. But I'll add some links in the Notion, and then you can access that as well. Cool. Now we have this embedded dashboard, but ideally what you want to do if you actually start adopting embedded analytics is leverage Tableau's JavaScript API. And Tableau JavaScript API gives you access to a lot more features. So what you could set up is, could, for example, have this button, if I click on it, export to PowerPoint, or getting the underlying data of a visualization. Or what we've seen in the past a lot is people incorporating Tableau Dashboard with D3. So D3 stands for data-driven documents. Those visualizations are also a lot on the web. So you can then basically interact between your website and the Tableau visualization. So let's have a look at how we do that. If we go into the Notion page, I have under resources, I put a link to the Tableau JavaScript API. And this is a documentation. And whenever you work with APIs or anything on the web, you'd want to read some documentation. Every time when I do embedded analytics, I just have the documentation open. And in the documentation, I can then read what I need to do. I don't know everything by mind, because that would be great, but that's not the case. So this is the official Tableau documentation. What we have here is some explanation of what we need to do. Now, actually, let's hop into the samples here, because what Tableau has done is Tableau has created a few years ago all of these different examples related to embedded analytics. And the one that we're going to practice with is this basic embed. So in order to do this basic embed, what we need to first do is load the JavaScript file, because similar to this CSS file, we need to load an external library, and that library contains a lot of the code that someone else has written, and it allows us to make it to work with that a little bit better. So let's actually first remove the embed code that we have earlier here. So let's remove all of this until it says script here at the bottom. So let's just remove that so the dashboard disappears from the page. And that should bring us back to only having the header followed by a button. So I'm just going to click File, Save. That should have removed it. So let's first bring in the JavaScript file from Tableau. How you do that is by going to the samples. Let's go to Basic Embed. And in here, there is this script tag. I'll put the script tag in the chat as well. This is also documented in the Notion page. So if I copy this, I'm gonna paste it in the chat. And what we need to do is we need to put this in the head section of the website. So that is potentially under this link. We can put it here. Because how an HTML page is being loaded is from top to bottom. So we first need to have loaded this JavaScript file before we can actually use it. And we're using it here at the bottom. Okay. So nothing should have changed if we hit save. It should just only load the JavaScript library. But now we have added the JavaScript file. What we need to do is create a place where we can display the dashboard. And in order to do that, what we're going to do is, first of all, in the HTML, let me make it a little bit bigger. We're going to create like an HR, which is just a line on the page. So you can see that's just a line break, like anything. You can do this in PowerPoint. The HR, and then underneath it, I want to create a div. And we also need to close this div off. And what a div is I often compare it with a container in Tableau. So we all know that in Tableau you have vertical and you have horizontal containers. And what you can do with those is you can place things on the page. So that's also what we have. This div, we're going to give an ID. So we're just going to say ID. And this is going to be this container. Now we're giving this an ID because what we need to do in the JavaScript side of things is we need to reference this container, this div. We need to reference it and say, hey, when this is on the page, load a dashboard. So this is going to be the ID of this container. Again, you can call this anything. You can call this whatever you want. It doesn't have to be this container. as long as when you reference it in the JavaScript, you can actually find it again. So let's save. Now, after this, what we need to do is we need to create a JavaScript file. So in Code Sandbox, we can create files where it says new file when I hover over. So I'm just going to click new file, and we're going to create a file which I'm going to call app.js. And the browser knows that this is a JavaScript file because we're putting .js at the end. Right? It knows that this index file is HTML, so that's how it identifies where it's coming from. And what we're going to do is we're just going to log something to the console. And the console is an ideal place where we can debug things. So I'm just going to say console.log, and we're going to say hello from the information lab. Now, console.log is a way that I use very often to debug. Lots of people do. But the console at the bottom of this page is here at the bottom. So we can see here console, and every web browser has a console. However, nothing is showing up here. And there is a reason, because in order to use the JavaScript file, we need to reference in the index file. So if we go back to HTML, index.html, what we want to do is just underneath the this container and before the closing body, we need to reference this file. So what we're going to do is we're going to type in script and then src, that stands for source, and that equals, and it equals app.js. So that basically tells the browser, load this JavaScript file. So and then we can close that off with, oh, no, it's a self-closing one. There we go. So let me put this in the chat as well. And what we have here is then script with a source of app.js. And now we can see here in the console, it says hello from the information lab. Excellent. We have written our first line of JavaScript. Hello from the information lab. But now what we want to do is actually render a visualization. So in order to do that, we first need to create some variables. And you can create variables in JavaScript by using const and then the name of the variable. First of all, we need a URL because that we need to find the place where we need to grab the dashboard from. And how we find that one is if we go to the Tableau public page again, when we had the share button, first of all, we copied the embed code, but underneath it is the link. So this is something that tripped me up a lot in the beginning when I started with embedded analytics. If you want to embed a Tableau dashboard, you don't copy the URL from the URL bar of the browser, but you copy the URL that is in this link section. So put that on your clipboard, then hop back into Code Sandbox. And this is going to be a string. So we're going to do that in double quotes. And if I then remove kind of this everything until the question mark, I don't really need that stuff. I'm going to save it. And we can see now we have a const URL equals this. Now what Code Sandbox will do is it gives us like a squiggly line saying, hey, URL is assigned but never used. That's correct, but we're going to use it in a bit. So we got the URL. Now what we need to do is we need to get the container where we need to place the visualization. So do const this container. So again, we're going to create a variable that equals, and we need to get the element from the HTML. So we need to actually get this place. So how we do that is we do document. And because we've given it an ID, what we can do is dot get element by ID. And we'll put this in the chat. It's also in the Notion page. So we do document.getElementById, and then we're going to say this container. this element where it says this container, this needs to be identical to the ID here. So if this is something else, that needs to reference what's in here. So this is a way to grab something from an HTML page. And so we have the URL and we have the this container. Now, a few steps of what we need to do. First of all, what we want to do is whenever the page loads, we want to execute a function. And that function basically creates the this object. So what we're going to do is we're going to type function init this from initialize the visualization. And then this is how you create a function in JavaScript. Function with the function keyword, brackets, followed by curly brackets. And whatever is in the curly brackets, that's going to be executed. So what we need to do is we need to create a new this. So I'm going to say let this equals new Tableau dot this, and that one's with capital. And the first thing that we need to do is we need to put in, let me just quickly check. We need to put in the container div. So first the this container, followed by the next thing that we need to put in is the URL. Okay. So new Tableau.this. So this is basically a function that needs to execute when the page loads. Now, if I just move that down, in order to load something when the page first opens, what we want to do is we want to do the following. We want to do document dot add an event listener. And event listeners are basically, you can compare them with actions in Tableau, like a click action, a URL action, a hover action. The event listeners are, for example, if someone clicks on something on a website, or if someone hovers over something on a website. So we do document.add event listener, and then we're going to say on click, or not on click, sorry, on DOM content loaded, we want to execute init this. I'm going to put this in the chat. Again, this is also in the Notion. Yes, exactly, like action triggers. So document.add event listener, DOM content loaded, init this. So if I hit save, we can now see that it renders the visualization. There we go. Now that's pretty cool, right? So we've written some JavaScript, we put something on the page. Now, just in terms of time, what I want to do is if we hit click me, what we want to happen is that people can export to, say, PDF. Now, how do we do that? And for that, we need to just jump a little bit more into the reference guide, the API reference guide. So if I go to reference, this is a very large page, and it might be a little bit daunting at the beginning, especially when I started. I was like, oof, there's so many things that I don't know. However, the more and more you practice with this, the more this documentation becomes clearer. So we have this top level diagram here, and how the JavaScript API works is we get the viz element. And the viz element is basically what we see here on the page. And the viz element is something we created here. So we have the viz element, and in that viz, what we can have is we can have workbooks. In workbooks, we can have sheets, and sheets are being split into three. We have a dashboard, we have a worksheet, and we have a story. So then that kind of this shows you kind of this diagram. So from the dashboard, we can get the dashboard object. From the worksheet, we can get the worksheet. And from the story, we can get the story. So if I then scroll a little bit further, lots of stuff around error messaging, of course, very important. However, what I want to go to is, I'm just going to search for it, is PDF export. So what Tableau has is these methods. And these methods you can add to the viz object. So you can say, show the viz or hide the viz. And you can do that on a button click, for example, or revert all async. So for example, here it says equivalent to clicking on the revert all toolbar button. So in Tableau server, you have that revert all toolbar. Refresh the data async. So what you could, for example, do is have a button on your page where people can click on to refresh the page. Or you could even automatically do that, like have an interval of like 5 minutes to refresh the page and refresh the dashboard. The one that we want to look at is this PDF thing. So show export PDF dialog. Now, let's hop back into this code sandbox. And we want to click on click me, and click me should show that button. So first of all, in index.html, we want to give the button an ID because that allows us to grab it in the JavaScript. And let's call this export PDF. Again, this is also documented in the Notion page. Just going to put that on my clipboard. Make sure that you save your work throughout. You will see, so if I make a change here, you will see that there's a little circle appearing if they're unsaved changes. So if I go back to app.js, what I can do now is I can grab that button by saying constant export PDF equals document.get element by ID. So getting the element again. And we're going to put export PDF. Now, what we want to do is...
Quick question.
Yes.
We have Claire in the chat saying, my console saying that Tableau is not defined.
Correct.
I've added the Tableau JavaScript in the header.
Yes. So that's a very good point. So if I go to my problems here, I can also see Tableau is not defined. That is a thing of Code Sandbox, because Code Sandbox doesn't, this problems element doesn't actually look for what's in here. Okay, so that's a known error with Code Sandbox. But if you use like a normal text editor, they will interpret this and they will see that correctly. As long as the visualization shows up, then it should work. Yes, so once we have the export button, what we want to do is we want to create a function, and I'm going to call that export to PDF. And what we want to do in this export to PDF button, export PDF function, is whenever someone clicks the button, then we need to execute this function. So what we're going to do is we're going to say this dot. And now, if I go to the reference guide, we need to reference this method. So I'm just going to copy that, show export PDF dialog, hop back into here, and I'm going to put that in there. So this.show export PDF dialog. However, there will be a problem when we do this, because how JavaScript works is I have this variable here, let this equals new tableau.vis, but it's within the initialization function. That means that I can't access this outside of this. Okay? So that's one of the kind of rules in JavaScript, if you can think of rules. But what we could do in order to actually access this outside of this function is to initialize it earlier. And what we can do is, for example, here on line 2, say let this. That will just initialize it. And then in here, where we have the initialization function, we're just going to remove let. So JavaScript has 2 ways of creating, actually 3, but there are different ways of creating variables, let and const. Const can't be reassigned, let can be reassigned. And now I can access this here. So this.show export PDF dialog. Now the very last step is whenever someone hits click me, that we can see the PDF thing pop up. So how do we do that? Is we already have access to export PDF here. So we're going to do export PDF. So that is the button here. Let's actually call this export PDF button. That makes it a little bit clearer that that is the button. So I'll just replace that. So export PDF button dot, and then we want to add an event listener, so similar to what we did earlier. And then whenever someone clicks on it, so the first element is click, we want to execute the export to PDF function. So that is this one. Again, all the code is in the Notion. So fingers crossed, if I now hit click me, there we go. It shows me the export to PDF button. Of course, I am using a button here. You can fully customize this. The sky is the limit here in whatever way you want this. It doesn't have to be a button. You can make it a toggle. You can make it a drop down. You can just make it whatever works for you, of course. Just in the interest of time, in the actual Notion, I have a lot more steps what we could look at. For example, the first bit in the Notion is embedding with the JavaScript API. It talks about how to actually embed it like we've done now. And I've done a section about add the interactivity. Okay? And this, what this will do is we've already done this one where we did export to PDF. And I've now done show export PDF dialog. But if you replace this show export PDF dialog, you can say show export PowerPoint or show export image dialog or show export cross tab. So you can just leverage those methods. If you want to learn more about filtering, I have some code snippets here as well that allow you to look for a thing called single value filtering. It will all work for the dashboard that I've created earlier. So we can see here, I have 3 buttons. And for each button, what we could do is we could loop over the buttons. And whenever someone clicks on the button, it filters the map. And we have also a button for clear the filtering. So that's a button to remove the filtering. And I also have a code snippet for switching between dashboards. So lots of use cases for embedded analytics. It's like an easy way to swap out dashboards on the page. You can do that with this switch this function. If you want to see that in action, if I go back to the main page, what we do at the Information Lab a lot is training sessions. And I run a training session with our data school. And what I've done is, let me see, yeah, here on the links, I have a link to a basic dashboard. If I click on it, it will show you kind of the finished product. So this finished product allows us to hide the visualization or show the visualization. We can export to PDF, so what we've already implemented. For example, also export the data, so it generates the crosstab. But also it allows us to, for example, create our own custom filtering elements. So then we can have the filters on the side as well. So this is kind of a finished product. Let me put this in the chat. Now, one of the things that I mentioned that is kind of different when you do embedded analytics is how you design the dashboard for embedding. So what you can do is like what we've done now here is just embed a full dashboard in a page, and that allows you to kind of interact with that dashboard. Yeah, source code, all of it is on GitHub. All of it is also in the Notion. So please look at the Notion and you can see all the source code. However, a good example that one of my colleagues built is a website. And again, this is in the Notion. It's superstore.theinformationlab.io. And this is kind of an interactive portal style. So what we see here is, this is not a Tableau dashboard. However, elements of this page is Tableau. So here, for example, we have, this is a Tableau sheet. It shows you profit ratio. We have sales, profit by order, average discount. That is coming from Tableau. This is Tableau, but it's not one big dashboard. It's just multiple sheets being displayed here. We also have, this is, for example, a line chart from Tableau using the new step function. If we then hover to product, we can see a bit more. So what my colleague did is here, again, have the KPIs on the top. Again, not one single dashboard, but he designed it in such a way that it allows you to put multiple in a page. And there we go. So this is a full dashboard here. So that is also an option when you look at embedding Tableau. Rather than embedding a full dashboard, you can embed elements on a page, which is, I think, pretty powerful. The last thing that I wanted to look at is authentication. Now, we've only got an hour. Authentication is something that you can talk about for half a day. But I've put some links here, how authentication typically works with Tableau. And Tableau uses a thing called trusted authentication. It has, of course, also, if you have Active Directory, if you have single sign-on experiences, those, of course, also work with embedded analytics. But Tableau has its own trusted authentication approach as well. So you can also use this. And what this will do is, this is a really good page that explains you what it's doing. But this diagram here is really useful by explaining what it does. This is potentially something you can send also to the people that are building the embed experience. Because what this is doing is it communicates between the browser, between the server and your Tableau server. And the server is a trusted host in the Tableau server. So that means whatever request comes from the server, Tableau server will say, hey, I recognize that IP address, and that IP address is something I trust. So I'm going to send you a token. And that token allows the person that accesses that website to view a dashboard. That token is only valid for one request. It's immediately being revoked. So the next time someone clicks on that, it will generate a new token. I have implemented this on the embedding website that I mentioned earlier. I've done that in the portal section. Now, what I have here is a sign-in experience. And this is, of course, not Tableau server. And what I'm going to put in is my credentials. And what it's then going to do is it's going to send those to Tableau. Actually, no, it's going to send them to web server, not to Tableau. Now, what it's going to do is it loads several dashboards. And let me zoom out. And this is a little portal that I built, and it has several dashboards here. And this is using trusted authentication. So what will happen if I now click on one of these dashboards, it will send the request to Tableau server. It includes my username that I just put in there. Tableau recognizes, hey, that request comes from Embedding the Information Lab. It trusts it, so it sends it back a token. Now that token is being validated, and then this visualization shows up. If I click out of this, the token is of course not valid anymore. So the moment I click on, for example, one of these other ones, so this is a dashboard from my colleague Pablo, it will ask again for a token and show you that element. I mentioned earlier the exporting experience. You can make whatever you want. So I saw someone mentioning like a radial or a radio box. I have a drop down here where I can just say, hey, let's generate a PDF here. Of course, that is not really limited to anything. You can make it whatever you want, whatever people put on a web page, you can make it interactive. Yeah, so that is authentication really briefly. If you want to learn more and do it in your own setting, of course, you can watch the recording of this, or if you go to this website, we have a whole host of videos here. I recorded about 11 or 12 different videos all around embedded analytics. It's using the same dashboard as the one that we've used today. But you can do it in your own speed, of course. This is probably a course of about 2 to 3 hours, depending how often you stop the video, of course. Yes, the link, Robin just put the link in there, very good. Yes, cool. Let's hop into the questions. So if Robin, if you can unmute yourself and read out some of the questions.
Of course. We have one question going back to some of the embedding in the HTML that we did. So Tim asked if you could show the button ID in the HTML, just so you could check if that was
Sorry,
right.
yeah, that's a good point, Tim. What I've done with the button is I've given it an ID of export PDF. So if you give it an ID of export PDF, that means that you need to reference that in the JavaScript. So if you then go into the JavaScript, you can see I'm doing document.getElementById, and then we can see export PDF here. What that will do, it gives you in the JavaScript access to the button. And giving access to the button allows you to listen for events, actions basically. And then you get this show export PDF dialog one. Yeah, cool, all works, very good. Any other questions, Robin?
Nice. We did have questions regarding buttons and functions coming through before. I think you've answered them already, but whether we can have different type of filters such as range filters or drop downs and type ins, are those also available in the JavaScript API, and can we then link them to buttons?
Yes, that's a very good point. So if we go here, I always use the browser search here. And then if we type in like, what is it, range filter? Yeah. So on the actual worksheet, what we can do, because if you know Tableau, filters are being applied on a worksheet level. So what we need to do is on the worksheet itself, we can either look for the filters. No, Lawrence, that's a good point. Do we have access to the portal? I don't have a open account. I tend to use that portal just for demonstration purposes. If you want to learn more about the techniques behind the portal, please email me or email Robin or contact us on Twitter, and we can talk about that a little bit more. Yes, so what we can apply in Tableau is, with the JavaScript API is apply filter async. That is just a simple filter. And I have an example of the simple filter in the Notion. So if we go to step 4, where it says embedding with the JavaScript API, I have here single value filtering, and that one uses this apply filter async. Okay. So that's apply filter async. We have the range filter async, the relative date. So we know relative dates in Tableau, hierarchical filters, so category to subcategory to products, for example. And we can also remove the filters by using the clear filter async method. Tableau has actually created a few filtering examples, which is in the documentation if you click on filtering examples. And that will basically tell you about the different ways of filtering here. So you can, for example, apply filters before the visualization loads.
Awesome. I think we've covered most of the questions in the list. So the full source code is on the Notions page. I think we are there unless I've missed somebody. But will we be able to export the chat history? That's one of them for all the links. So all the links are already on the Notion page themselves. Yeah. However, I'll investigate whether we can
export that. Yeah, I think we get, when we do the recording, we can see if there's anything missing. Steve says, plan on using Tableau Online to embed on my organization's website. Users have a sign-on access to website. Do they each need a Tableau Online license to access? Yes. So for Tableau Online is always per user. What you need to do is everyone that accesses it on the website also needs to have a login to the Tableau Online. Cool. Great that you enjoyed it, Tim. Good to see that you're coming back to our sessions. It is 1 minute past 11 in the UK. Thanks a lot for joining. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to any of us. And also keep an eye on the meetup page. We'll have more sessions in the future. Yes, I think I went a little bit fast as well. That's a good point. Yes, time for lunch. I'm also not based in the UK, so I'm going to have lunch as well. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you in the next session.